Hi and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Rita Borenstein, and welcome Derek Seagrief, my guest of today. We met before, and
Thank you.
met you also in person. You're a well-known astrologer, and your experience since 1978, I started to count, I think it's almost 50 years. And
Yes.
as I understand, you've been interested in astrology since you were very young, and we're still young, but you have gathered a lot of experience and written 15 books at least,
Mm.
and many written articles, and also had workshops and lectures in Scandinavia and UK, where you come from actually, and also in the United States. And I know
Right.
you live in Denmark these days. Um,
Mm.
Today we're going to talk about one of your books called Entry and Exit: Your Birth and Death Horoscope. And I read this book already back in 2012 when it was first published in Swedish. It was then called Dödens astrologi, right?
Yes.
So we're going
Mm.
to talk and discuss this book, and so I'm going to ask you a few questions, and feel free now, Derek, to share your immense knowledge. And so let's start. And is there anything you would like to add to your
Well,
introduction?
thank you, Rita. Lovely to see you again, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this very taboo subject, which it is. Um, you mentioned about my Swedish publication in 2012. That was deliberate in December 2012, but it was geared for a Swedish audience. So much of the content of that first book was for a Swedish audience, and since then I reprinted it this year, and that's why we're talking, because it has totally new information. There's new chapters on new areas, and it's unfortunately this is an ongoing project because friends, colleagues, people, family, and that die, and then I have plenty of material to work with. So I've said to the universe, I don't need more examples. I have enough working examples because, of course, this is going to happen all the time. But our subject is, a very eternal subject because,
Mm.
nature accustoms us every evening to the death process when we sleep, and every morning we wake up. So this death and rebirth process is a part of our everyday world. But we are still very reluctant to see this dance between the inner world and the outer world.
Mm.
And so this is why I write such a book, which is prop full of examples of how to work with, not just work with the death process. So I have to make that very clear. My book is designed to get people to be more cooperative with universal intention,
Mm.
right? And that is a very loaded question or sentence that I give because then there's 300 pages to explain what that means and give examples of what that means.
Yeah.
But very simply, we have a resistance to this very natural part of our life.
Mm.
And in the end, what dies? People say death, but what is it that dies? Right? And you and I know this, that what dies is the limited ego personality, which is there for one incarnation. And if we work with that and accept that, then we have the basic idea of why I write such a book is the continuity of consciousness, that things go on. The personality and the experiences, all that is rolled up in memories in what we would call the permanent atom, on the physical plane, the astral plane, the mental plane, and so on. And then the incarnating soul picks up these permanent atoms when it reincarnates, and all those memories from all these different lifetimes are then we have access to. Right? But it's the soul. This is the point. The soul is what it reincarnates, not the personality. So once one's understood that, then a lot of the fear of death is removed.
Mm.
Right?
That's right. That's right. I think you mentioned also the words conscious exit when I read the book first. I thought it was because I worked as a nurse, as
Right.
you know, but not everybody know, and in also in hospice. And I read in the preface of the book that you also not only the death of your father reminded you of all this that you're talking about now, but you were also working in hospital.
Hospital,
Is that
yes.
right? What were you working with there? With the
Well,
autistic?
again, um, I took on a job that nobody else wanted, which was to
Really?
be an assistant in the mortuary department,
Ah, yeah, that's
which
quite
meant that,
unusual.
I was daily picking up the departed from their hospital wards. And as the curtains are closed and no one sees death.
Yeah.
And I understood immediately this is a real issue. If we don't see death, then we're not going to see it as a natural part of a cycle.
Mm.
Right? I mean, you in Sweden, you know that certainly in northern Sweden, you have a tradition of seeing the dead body
Sure.
and welcoming it and celebrating and all the rest of it. Um, and this is how it should be, a
Mm.
celebration. So with my wife, who is an opera singer, we do actually death rituals. And when an individual is not allowed because they're not part of the Folkekirche, then where do they go if they want a ritual, to help them on the other side?
Yeah.
So we're often doing such rituals, and the last time I did it was a Danish man that had a lot of African friends, and it was so wonderful to see the coffin open and his body open, and he had a Mickey Mouse tie on, and he had a smile on his face. And I loved him because yes, we all going to die, but but here was a person that really had style. He didn't have fear. And there was like 50, or not 50, maybe 40 plus, but there was all these African types around. And so I made a ritual and we danced around the coffin and things like that. So because of the fact that, you know, we don't see a dead body, but if you do see a dead body, and I, in these early years, I had 5 years of working in the mortuary department, and I saw autopsies, and I saw, cancer, I saw brain removed, and all the rest of it. So I was, it was like a training for me.
Mm. Yes.
And I don't have fear in those areas, but I understand many people, when they like my first going back long time, but when I was doing this, the very first job I had, okay, Seagrief, there's a dead body on that floor. Go and get it with this other new man. And this other new man was an Italian,
Hmm.
and I knew Italians don't deal with death very easy, and so when we took the warm body that was all wrapped up, like a mummy, I knew I had to take the head. And when he took the legs and he felt the warmth, he dropped it and he ran out the ward. He literally ran and
Yeah.
disappeared, and I was left there. It was like a Monty Python episode. I was laughing, and the nurses could hear I was laughing, and then I was struggling to get this heavy body up on the wagon to take down.
Mm.
So I learned a lot. If some of our listeners have some knowledge of astrology, then I have quite a lot of Pluto and eighth house, and Pluto is the underworld. So in a London hospital, the underworld is deep down, and my senses are quite acute. So sometimes I could come down and I open the fridge and I could feel that somebody's been there.
Mm.
And believe it or not, this is not a very good example of human nature, but it again taught me a lot about Pluto and how people, are very much involved in, riches. People, and this was people in the know, like nurses or doctors, were coming down and knocking the gold out the teeth.
Yeah.
Can you believe that
Yeah.
people can do that? Well, yes, they can.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So, without going into all those stories, it just, this is my education about the nature of human existence. And then
Yes.
over the time, I also mentioned this in my book, that I met many teachers, of course, because, we're all seekers. And one by one, all these different teachers died within several months of me meeting them. So I had to consider, am I putting a curse on them? No, of course I'm not.
Mm.
But like I had an Indian teacher, I had a couple of English healer teachers and things. And even Martinez here in Scandinavia, he's well known.
Yeah.
And he was one of the reasons why I came to Denmark. And I wanted to, I met him several times and I wrote about his cosmic consciousness. And when I wrote about it, and it was first published in a Danish astrology magazine, the very day it was published, he died. But you see, I had been with him in his party when he was talking about he's going to die, and everyone was kind of like hush hush,
Mm.
and I was actually smiling and laughing, and our table, a small table, was laughing with him,
Yeah.
but the people that around us were telling us to be quiet. Right,
Yeah.
so I'm just giving that as an example that Martinez and many other teachers disappeared
Yeah.
after a short time of me knowing them, because that was also part of my learning lesson. If these are highly advanced individuals, then they would have a more conscious exit.
Mm.
And Martinez
Yes.
is one example, then the planet Uranus or the sign Aquarius will be very prominent in a conscious exit.
Mm.
So when Martinez died, he has Uranus on the ascendant.
Mm.
And I go in my book through a list of the different kind of planets that you can take exit on.
Mm.
But when the sign of Aquarius and the planet Uranus is very prominent on the death chart,
Mm.
you know that that person has entered into the mind of God very quickly.
Mm.
They can bypass a lot of unnecessary, let's call it stages. They can go directly. Why go A, B, C, D, E, F when you go A and F?
Mm.
They can
Yeah.
short circuit a lot. This is one by conscious exit.
Yeah.
They have been preparing, not the last few days or weeks, but they've been preparing for most of the incarnation to make this transition.
I see.
All
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So the book describes what this means and gives examples. And ultimately, as we're going into the Aquarian age,
Mm.
we are all, as souls, we are all working towards a conscious exit,
Mm.
which means that we do not have a resistance. Because remember, when we are born, birth means on the physical plane means a death to the spirit level because we
Yeah.
then become unconscious of the spirit. So when we die, we then are birthed into the spiritual realms.
Mm.
So, dear friends, what's the problem?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
is there a
Yes.
problem? It's just a change of address.
Right. Right. I read once that when someone is born, there's this mourning in the spirit world, and when they die, there's this uh,
Right.
party
So,
party. So this I hear from
it's
many
all,
clients.
every spiritual discipline emphasizes, self-awareness, self-realization.
Mm.
But to do that, one has to remember the source.
Yeah.
Kabbalah, Buddhism, even Christianity, every discipline emphasizes the power of remembrance,
Mm.
right? But people don't want to remember what they think is unpleasant things, right? But
Yeah.
is death unpleasant, right? I mean, if we are exposed to certain teachings, and this is for us here in the West, 2,000 years of Christianity has exposed us to certain attitudes about death and, about suicide, for example, about hell and heaven. Well, again, in the end, you go exactly where, your mind constructs.
Mm.
Heaven and hell is a mental construct.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes, for
dare I
sure.
say, religion is also a mental construct. So beyond these forms lies spirit. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking
Yes.
about entrance into spirit.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's quite common with birth horoscope. I've experienced that with you and many others. But death horoscope, it's quite. I'd never heard it before I met you,
Right.
and read your book from 2012. I also read in this book that we're talking about that someone wanted to arrange some kind of workshop or gathering over a weekend or something about this topic, but no one applied.
Yeah, well, that was interesting because th twice I live in Copenhagen, so, and the Theosophical Society, teaches and works with this. So I thought it would be natural. This is many, many years ago. And both times, when I do other workshops, they're fully booked. But these workshops on entrance and exit, no one turned up.
Yeah.
Nobody booked. And I said to the organizers, why? And they said, well, they know that you're a good astrologer. It's probably getting too close for them. Well, but
Mm.
so what do I do except shake my head?
Yeah,
You know,
it's a
so
bit like voodoo thinking that if you say a word or you voodoo is another topic, of course. But I had once I don't know her anymore, but is a doctor, a pediatric. She was a mother of one of my kids' friends, and she is a doctor. And always where she turned up, people died like that. I
yes,
mean, she was also getting very almost scared about it because she was on a flight or somebody died on the flight or things like that. It was not even people she knew. And of
right,
course, a person starts to wonder. But the scary part is um, then it makes people want to go away from the topic, not to get closer to the topic. I started to work as a nurse in a hospice because I worked as a nurse then before
mm,
in surgical wards and stuff and other
right,
places, and then I saw that if someone is dying, it was called moribund, which is a dying person, and you don't need to go in there because that person is dying anyway, so you just tiptoed around it,
yeah,
and so it was super taboo. But only when I came to this Catholic, it was Catholic hospice
right,
where I worked, and then there was a preparation, and we were singing and. Singing some kind of Catholic hymns when person were going to die and stuff like that, opening the window, and they had all sorts of procedures. So for me, it was interesting to see a different way to be with people who the people knew they were there. It wasn't much
right. So
time
I mean,
left,
and
so
as
to
you know, in
speak.
the East, they understand and practice the power of sound. That's why
Mm.
you employ, priests who are chanting, even though you're dead. But chanting is to help you go through the bardo states, even because hearing is the most evolved sense that we have.
Sure.
It's the
Yeah.
last sense to disappear on the physical plane when we die.
Yeah.
But on the inner, when we're going through these journeys, we can hear these evocative sounds
Yes.
that the priests are chanting
Yes.
to help us go through. So sound really is sound healing and sound. I saw even this morning I saw this podcast about sound frequencies affecting leukemia cells and
Mm.
how we could use and they are using and employing sound,
Yeah. Sure.
not pharmaceutical things, to destroy the buildup of cancer-forming tissue. And
Yeah.
this is the future science of sound.
Sure.
But this is something that has been well known for a long time.
Mm.
So to go back to our subject, the death chart. If we look at life, we'll know that the soul engineers all the most important events and experiences in our life.
Mm.
But the two most important events are birth and death. Right? So it's very natural, in my mind, it's very natural that the soul chooses that birth time. Then you have the set of instructions. There's from spirit levels that you are to work with in this lifetime. And then the death chart is also there employed by the soul, the exit, because it's the final school report. How did you do? These were the lessons or lesson, but there's normally one major lesson, but there can be several other smaller lessons. And then how did you do? And my book goes into what this can mean because why are, we learn from repetition, but why, with many horoscopes, the death chart shows some of the same planets doing the same things. So what has one learned? Right?
Yes,
And
yes.
my point is also the death chart is like a template for the next incarnation.
Mm.
Right? This is where continuity of consciousness goes in. Right? And I go into this obviously in more detail than what we're going to talk about here today, but
Sure.
but it's the sun, which is of course the heart, and then it's the heartbeat. Consciousness is linked to the head, but the life aspect is linked to the heart. But when the heart stops beating, that's when we die medically, right?
Mm.
So it's quite natural in esoteric teachings that you take up where you left off. So if I die in November, when the sun is transit in Sagittarius, right, that would mean that the next incarnation I will take up where I left off, and the heartbeat continues, and then I'll be born with the sun or the ascendant, or a very important issue regarding the sign of Sagittarius. Right? All this is part of the mysteries of death and dying that I try to explore because I think it is of course, a quite ecstatic area once you remove fear, because
Mm.
then you see the links, and you see, there's obvious links, and I give many examples. Michael Jackson is one example. He has at least six of exactly the same things on the birth chart that are being repeated on the death chart.
Oh, really?
Now, when you see that, and I go into different examples, when you see that amount of repetition,
Mm.
then it begs the question, you see, what have I learned?
That's right. Yes, yes. Because I know there's many chapters in the book, but the chapter "How old will I be when I die?" I guess that's a scary question for a lot of people because you know you're going to die, but knowing exactly when. That was the thing in the hospice that they knew they had a day or
Right,
two or maybe weeks, but so that's you have to just accept it. But always there's a hope, and the death process, as it's written, there's many books about it, the death process, how you deny and you,
right.
all these processes. But
But
tell
as
me a
you've
little
worked
bit
in a
about,
hospice, you know that when people have a sense of renewed purpose and motivation, they live longer.
yeah, yeah, for sure,
Right. And
yes.
then in my client work, when people have gone through, terminal ill, almost death and dying processes, and they recover,
Mm,
they understand and experience that how do I use the time that I have?
yeah.
Right? And people are not using their time very well.
Mm,
And it's not about being fearful of death and when. It's not about that. It's more about how do I use the time that I've got, and do I use it well? And
yes.
to make a friend of time is really to come into this understanding of long life or short life. I give it many examples of what a short life could mean
Yes.
astrologically and what a long life can mean.
Mm,
But this is not. This is the reason is not what someone like me can be like a judge and jury with. It's a karmic thing.
mm,
The soul decides. If I show a chart of a young boy, only 9, 10 years of age, who has brain cancer and dies, right? And then around him, because his mother was a well-known personality, around when there's a funeral, there's like 300 people, 300 boys and girls and adults, and they're all crying.
mm,
I myself was also there at this funeral because I know the parents. Think of how that person, that young boy, the soul will use that person as an instrument to affect all these 300
sure.
people.
Yes, yes,
But,
yes.
but but we don't think like that. We think that the ego is about me, me, me. But
Mm,
when we get into soul consciousness, it's the group.
sure.
So the
Yes.
group And then I go into an illustration that this was, an exit via Chiron, the wounded healer.
Mm.
So he was wounded, yes, and yet he was a very brave and dignified soul, even at that young age. But that's my point, that it reminded all those 300 people, how do I use my time?
Sure.
And therefore, that was a service that that soul did through that exit.
Yes. Yes.
And we don't think like this.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And yeah. So some things are not as they seem. One could say actually. The world is upside down in many ways, and how now we're in a certain time where things move very quickly in the world, and we can access all the news, and many people's deaths are reported. It's called they were eliminated. They say in the news
Right,
that person were eliminated and stuff like that, and we have many ways. And then going into the afterworld, which has become my specialty in a way with the Life Between Life sessions. And I met many people who had near-death experience, and also these bedside bedside experiences when you see they all lighten up before they
right,
go,
right.
and like they meet someone who comes to get them and to meet them and greet them and all that. And so you write about all this in your book too, as I understand.
Right,
It's called the Bardo in certain traditions, and in between lives, it's not between a certain life and another life, but where you are when you're not incarnated.
right.
So you've been talking about this a lot already, about the learning and all that, but would you like to talk more about this
Yeah,
state
well,
where you're not
yeah.
in the
Yes, if
body,
we have
where
a
you
workshop situation, perfect. But in a few minutes, yes, I'll just make it, as simple and as brief as possible. So, you know, as an astrologer, I work with the fact that we're in a family, a solar system, and all these planets are there. And so, because it is a family, when we die and we are then going beyond the Earth aura, right? Then we're going to make the transition to various planets, right? So, these planets are dimensions in consciousness,
mm,
right? So we could look at, Venus, and we'd say, oh, Carl Sagan, the astronomer, says, oh, it's like an incarnation of hell because it's all acid and it's heat. And yeah, we're not looking at the physical body, we're looking at the inner dimension. All right. So when we die, we go through these different phases, and each phase will bring us technically to, the moon is our closest planet. It's not a planet, it's a satellite, but from the moon, then we go, Venus, Mercury, blah, 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 until we go beyond our solar system into the fixed star or stellar region, which is where we actually come from. The sun, everything in this solar system is based on the sun, but the sun is a star. So we are star material. So our home is actually, as a soul, it originates, and technically is what's called the monad in theosophical terms, but spirit in normal language, it originates in the stars. All right, so when we make the transition down or up, we're making connection with these different planetary dimensions. Now, if I look at a horoscope and I see, oh, this person has, Moon and Saturn in opposition, well, that would tell me a lot about, their attitudes about their body or their mother, or they don't really like their history, their family life and all the rest of it. But where did that come from? It's there straight away when you look at the birth chart, right? But it's because that person has got experiences of these planetary states out of incarnation. Right. Now, when we sleep, we can go past our Earth aura and go to other planetary spheres, but it's normal that people normally hover around, this our planet aura within inside the aura. But when we die, and then we can start to explore all these other dimensions. So there are intelligences. Of course, there are. There are inhabitants of these planets. So how will I deal with a Venusian? I would deal very nicely with a Venusian. How will I deal with a person from Mercury or from Saturn? right? So all these are what we call the dimensions, which are then reflected by the aspects, planetary relationships on our birth chart. But we've learned it in and out of incarnation. Right. So when I described that the Bardo states are actually planetary Bardo states, and for example, on the birth chart, you'll recognize that if you're born, that's the ascendant. When we come out the mother's womb, that's the birth moment. Then the opposite point will be very important for, let's call it, a completion of this incarnation. That's a seventh house cusp. Traditionally, the eighth house had been assigned to the area of the non-physical world. So the eighth house has a lot to do with the Bardo states, the non-physical. So how do we, deal with this? Well, the book goes into some examples. I'm a bit reluctant to go into too many examples in the book because, this is real, what I call the deeper mysteries of life. But my main point in our conversation is that if you haven't worked out, I do give one example, like, Ernest Hemingway. um, if the ruler of the eighth house, in this case Mars, is very close to the ascendant, there's all the potential of doing violence to oneself. Right. And as he's a great writer, but as you know, if you look at his history, that yes, he committed suicide with a with a shotgun. He blew off his head, but this shotgun was given to him by his mother on his birthday one time, and it was the same shotgun that his father used to commit suicide. You
Funny.
know, and so I go into the story, the astrology of showing that, you know, because of the Pluto, the self-destruct that was very prominent on the ascendant and Mars at the same time, it was pretty obvious that this was going to be a potential time when he was going to commit suicide or do something, He used to do all kinds of dangerous sports, including he fell out of an aeroplane without a parachute once, but he survived. So he was used to this near death experiences. But in the Bardo states, that would mean that the Mars principle, right? Remember, in the Bardo, there's all these images, and I go into the book as to what a sun or Mars or Mercury or Saturn or Uranus or whatever the planet is, the images can be distorted. So Mars is cutting instruments. So Mars can also be wasps. So what happens when you are surrounded by gigantic wasps? And what happens when there's, bombs like war craters? That's very plutonic. These craters. Imagine that you got, craters all around you, and so on and so on. Well, that would be an experience in the Bardo states to develop, the Mars and Pluto that are there on the death chart to develop this courage and endurance and being able to, go through this. Now, again, Bardo means all these images will come up. That's why in Tibetan, you have all these on either side of you as you go through and go to the higher dimensions, you get the distortions and all these, let's call it, the demonic forces, which are just, I have several around me, because they're like friends. I laugh at them because once I had my very best friend in England was a Greek man, and his father died, and his father was a very down to earth, very material type personality, and I slept in the father's bedroom one night, and this father came to me, in a dream state, really angry and really pissed off that I was sleeping in his bed, and I told him to F off, and I wasn't going to be fearful of that. Now, I give that example because That's exactly what these type of bardo states represent.
Mm.
So the person, are you fearful of this image? Are you going to be thrown off balance by that image? Or are you going to go to the higher dimensions, go towards the light and not be, distracted by fear? All
Mm.
right. So, this is not any moral issue. It's not ethical what we're talking about. We're talking about energies.
Yes.
And energies, planets are archetypes. And in my daily work, I remind people that you can elevate this planetary archetype or it could be distorted and perverted. So Mars is courage, right? And very clear decision making. But if it's distorted, it can mean cruelty, and it can mean a form of dominance and yeah, and so on and so on. So
Yes.
we're only talking about energy frequencies.
Mm.
So
Yes.
the work that we're all involved in is to move through these bardo states rather quick.
Mm.
Right. And then in theosophical terms, it's called the so-called heaven is Deva Khan. But Deva Khan is like the higher astral body that we're there, we're enjoying this kind of never land. Everything seems peaceful and everything, but it's not a permanent state, and nor should it be.
No.
Right. And so the point is to keep on keeping on working with these different planetary dimensions until we're able to literally cooperate with, the planets are a team. They work as a team. They don't work as individuals. The ego works with one thing at a time. But
Yeah.
the planets, because they're a group consciousness, then they work as a team.
Mm. Yes.
And we also have to have this relationship in our horoscope and not have any blockages or denial.
Mm.
And that's what's called evolution. Because
Yes.
I have blockages and denials, as every human being does. But, working with them and cooperating with them and identifying what it is one has to work with and doing that,
Mm.
that's the purpose of the horoscope.
That's
And then
right.
the focus is upon living, with, and when a person asks me what is spirituality, I remind them that it's full living on
That's
all
right.
the planes.
Yes.
Now, full living on all the planes is a high ideal to
Yes.
aspire to,
Yes.
but that's what it means to work as a soul.
That's right. That it's like a paradox to be friend with death, to live, because I meet a lot of people who seem to be fearful of life in such,
That's it.
and to evolve as a person, and to come out as a soul, or whatever you want to call it. And most of the clients who I do these life between life sessions, which is going into this so-called, the bardo is a name, and life between life state, based on the work by Dr. Michael Newton, which I'm interested in. Most clients, when they experience death in such a constructed way during hypnotherapy, they just want to go back to their life, and start, they become more creative. And not everybody, of course, but that's also
Mm.
one would think maybe that they want to die then, because it was so pleasant to meet their guides, and the spirit world, and go to all these places. But it's quite the opposite. So quite life is quite a paradox in such a sense. So reading this book, Entry and Exit: Your Birth and Death Horoscope, what would you like to share with our listeners? Why would a person read such a book, even though you feel a little scared about it, or it scares you somehow, for one reason or the other? Would you like to?
Yeah, well, that's the reason why. That's why I write the book for that reason to describe it. So, in a few sentences, the first thing, I on a daily basis, I'm working all the time with eliminating the thought form of fear. People have fear about lack of money, fear about my partner leaving, or fear of death, or fear of whatever. So fear blocks energy, right? And whatever we fear, we give power to, right? So there's a lot of power being projected onto this theme of death. So, on a workshop, I give a meditation visualization where what is your image of death? And people have this, Christian thing about skeleton and the horse and all that shit, where I remind them that part of my reason why I work with this is that I have a very I wouldn't say ancient Egyptian, I would say eternal Egyptian viewpoint, which is their version of death is the goddess Hathor, who is the goddess of beauty and joy and ecstasy and music and dance and all the rest of it, and love. But she's also the goddess of the West, the goddess of death when the sun sets. So in the sarcophagi, which is a word meaning eating flesh, eating the mortal parts of us, in all these sarcophagi or coffins, we would call them, there's a painting and picture of the Hathor goddess, and her arms are embracing you to welcome you into the other world. So that's my version of death. And I don't have any, of course not, or else I wouldn't write the book. I don't have any problem with that. But for most people, it's a fear. And now we're talking about the other thing, the unknown. First, the problem with thought forms of fear limit us, restrict us, and all the rest of it. And the second thing is the um, so I got many thoughts in my head at the moment when you asked that question. Um, the second thing is to consider that when we look at the death aspect, we think it's final, right? And that's part of the problem. If we think it's final, but it isn't, right? Like I remind people when people ask me, do you believe, Derek, in astrology? And I say, yeah, I believe that after the summer it's autumn, and after the autumn it's winter, and after the winter it's spring. That's what I believe in. Right? And again, we've lost this, we're so fragmented, we've lost this ability to work with cycles.
Yeah.
But you see, it's the feminine part of our psyche that understands and works with death and rebirth. The masculine part does not like that and feels uncomfortable because it can't control it. But when we come to matters of death, it's the greatest mystery of life. You have to surrender to something greater than you. But if we're too masculine, I don't mean men, I mean the masculine part of our psyche. If we work with the feminine more and elevate the feminine, we work with cycles, and then we have a glimpse of eternity.
Mm.
So those are two basic reasons, and the third reason is, I want people to have a more livingness about their life.
Mm.
And if we look at, what is the area where, like the shadow that I feel castrated in, or I'm blocked, or I'm limited. But if we're looking in that direction and working with it, and the horoscope can show us that, then energy flows,
Yeah.
right? So there is, as you know, a increase of health issues. They're stronger and deeper and more chronic than ever before.
Mm.
One can look at various, like the obvious dementia and Parkinson's. Why is it on the increase? Why is Kaiserschnitt, cesarean births, are up on the increase by like we're now up to almost like half. I mean, but anyway, all these are indications that we are moving away from our true center.
Mm.
We're disconnected to our center.
Yes.
So we have to get back into our center.
Mm.
But our center, is our center our ego or the soul? Well, I mean that it's a dance between both. The soul needs and requires the ego personality to deal with the physical plane, to
Yeah.
deal with it. So therefore, the reason why our planet is so unique in contrast to many other planets is that we have choice. It's called free will.
Mm. Yeah.
See, as one psychologist, Sagioli, psychosynthesis, said, choice gives us dignity as a human being. But how well do we use choice and what are we choosing?
Mm.
And this is why, we have all this fake news and it's so obvious. I think it's so bloody obvious, what's going on the planet at the moment that people can't sit on the fence. Every human being has to make a choice about what is the lifestyle they want and not be drowned and overwhelmed by fear.
Yes.
But remember, we are a materialistic society, not just in Scandinavia, but the world.
Mm.
And when you are a materialistic society, um, you buy more when you're fearful.
Yes.
A person who I'm not fearful, so therefore I don't buy very much. I buy what I need, and not so I'm not a very good consumer. So this is the point. The more that pharmaceutical or governments can make us fearful, the more that we'll buy.
Sure. That's
Right?
right.
And
Yeah,
this is
that's
not
right.
the path that we need to go on. So, as human beings, we have to make choices. And this
Mm.
is the choice between the outer world that dominates our consciousness or the dance. I keep calling that word because it is a dance
Yeah.
between the inner life and the outer world. We need this dance. And
Yes.
when we get that dance, then we understand personality and soul, they are to work together. And
Mm.
it's our job, it's our choice to get it to work together.
Yes.
So we have to make better choices.
Mm. Yes. Yes. I say amen to it.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's why it takes a long time. But on this planet, and when you go to other planets like Saturn, and you're there within, they asked you, why are you here? What are you doing? There's no room for tourism. If you're going to be with us on this sphere, you have to be committed to something,
Yes.
right? And again, each planet has its particular characteristics.
Mm.
So for our listeners, I would say that one way that you can start to move into this soul personality is whatever you use time on. Time is like very, very important. Yeah, because most people are fearful of how much time do I have. You know, no, rather look at how do I use time well? Because I can ask a client, what's your priorities? What do you use time on? What you use time on is what's important to you.
Mm.
And you can tell by the list that people write about what they use time on. That's their worldview.
Yeah.
So all of us need to learn that we're multidimensional beings. So multidimensional means, okay, yeah, you've done that, then do something quite different. Make the contrast. We have the material life, we can't avoid that, and we're not meant to avoid it, we're meant to use it. But we have to bring more spirit or more light or more consciousness down on the physical plane.
Sure.
So therefore, we need these, different dimensions that we're working with. So there's plenty of time for everything. People
That's
should not
right.
be fearful of
Yes.
time,
Yes.
but they should
Someone.
work with time consciously. Time
Yes.
is plastic. Make it plastic. Don't, we all have routines, but you can break different patterns and being a pattern breaker and introducing more livingness. That's your goal. That's my goal. That's all our listeners. That's their goal as well.
Yes.
Bring more
Yes.
livingness into the everyday world.
Yes, it's truly like a paradox in this do less, accomplish more, as it's said, someone
Right.
said. Yes, so interesting to hear you speak about all these things that you speak about, and also the book is amazing, and I'd like to read this new version of it. Of course, I haven't had the time to read a new version yet, and but I consulted you a few times as an astrologer, and I can warmly recommend it. Do you still come to Stockholm once in a while, or it's I know, or do you how
Yes,
do
I
you?
do, but I haven't come to Stockholm for the last year because I've been, basically too busy with too many other things.
Yes,
But of course I
yes,
do. I mean, I love Stockholm. I've lived in Stockholm. It's like
yeah.
if I wasn't in Copenhagen, I would be living in Stockholm.
Really? Yes. So can people, just for our listeners, is it possible to consult you
Yeah.
online then?
Yeah,
Uh,
so a lot of my work, more than 50% of my work is on Zoom. I have
yeah.
American clients and Brits and people all
Yes.
around. So, so Zoom is the easiest, right?
Yeah.
And I will come to Stockholm next year, not this year because this year is already kind of like booked. But so I will be there, and I know people like the physical being there, but I'm so used to doing like you and I have now on Zoom. It's not
Yes.
a barrier to me,
No,
and
no,
nor
no.
should it be for the other
No,
person.
yeah, yeah. I do a lot of sessions.
Right.
Strangely enough, hypnotherapy, many hours online, because
Yes.
there's a sense that you're still in the same space. face somehow, just like I feel like talking to you here. Yeah, so we'll put the info below this video, how to contact you and also how to order your books. And I'm very excited that in a short while, a week or two, we will have another video talking about another of your books.
Yes.
Would you give a little teaser about that book? it's it's
Well,
about tarot and yeah.
yes, this book that we've just been talking about, has got like 40 years of client work and life experience behind it. But I would say that this other book is called The Wheels of Astrology and Tarot.
Yes.
I got into tarot when I was 15, 16 years of age. Right. And so when I started to work with the cards, I didn't have any teacher, but I let my intuition, show me the path. And when I worked with the cards, and then I learned astrology from the cards.
Hmm.
And when I learned astrology and tarot, then I learned Kabbalah from the cards. And the cards are very much linked to the tree of life and things like this
Yeah. Yes.
and so on. So so I would say even the astrology and tarot, I've got like 50 years behind that.
Yeah.
So both these books are what I would call my legacy.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'm writing other books on Kabbalah and the link with astrology and tarot and things like that. Because that's what I've dedicated my life to for, I'm now 73, just so that everyone knows. But age is not the issue here. So no, I'm plowing back what I have spent and dedicated many, many years of my life. So these books are, packed with that. I hope
Yes.
livingness, and
Yes.
I'm making links that are not shown in other books. Because if they were shown in other books, then I would recommend those other books. I write what is not being written.
Yeah.
So, to my knowledge, there's no other book been written about the link between tarot and astrology. There
No.
are references or chapters in other books, but there's no one book on this subject, and
No.
that's what my book tries to fill that missing gap.
Yeah, that would be exciting to talk about next time,
Right.
and to inspire people. And it's wonderful. So, thank you, Derek. It's been great, as usual. When I meet you, I get so inspired, and I warmly recommend you, as I said before, as an astrologer. I don't know if you have time for more clients, but if there's someone who wants to have it's
Yes, I'm
really
always open, Rita. You know.
okay, okay. So it's it's packed with information. I still keep listening on the recordings from when I met you a few years ago,
Yeah.
to learn
Well,
more.
thank you for today, and thank you for the recommendation and basically the opportunity for sharing. I think that's wonderful.
That's
And we've had a
nice.
very interesting dialogue here on this today. So thank you, Rita, very much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Okay, so uh, for all you who are listening, in case you're interested, of course, you can contact Derek or me, or write something under the video. It's always exciting to have a conversation with listeners and to see how everything is. If there's, are you fearful of death, or do have you? How is your relationship to this phenomena, which we all know? It's like this. They call it like taxes and death. No one can escape them.
Yeah.
so
Right.
so we
Yeah.
better learn
Yeah.
about it a little bit, as far as I understand. Okay, so bye
Yeah.
bye to our
Thank
listeners,
you.
and
Thank you,
bye.
Rita. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.